Aerial starvation warfare is a project I am currently conducting at the Center for Research Architecture in the Forensic Architecture stream. As of present, it is an analysis of the current correlations between aerial strikes conducted by the Saudi-led coalition and the patterns of starvation and catastrophic food conditions in Yemen. The current plan is to conduct further analysis on the patterns between the strikes and the hunger issues in order to establish any possible or likely correlations. The initial research question for this project was, how can forensic aesthetics contribute to international criminal justice within planet Earth's ecology? While this remains an open question, the project will move on from this question due to its vagueness and size. One can ask a question like this and spend an enormous amount of time trying to answer it without providing a clear answer. It is therefore not a suitable question for the project with the given time here at the CRA. This is predominantly due to the scale of the question and due to the at present lack of definitive clarity when it comes to the topic of international criminal justice, which for this project is too large to answer by an individual. Therefore, a second question was formulated. How can forensic aesthetics of material objects and witnesses in or relating to Yemen contribute to international criminal justice within planet Earth's ecology? While this question narrowed the research down to Yemen, it is still too vague and unclear to provide an answer to it in the project. Therefore, a present research question has been formulated. How have attacks on Yemeni bridges and infrastructure by the Saudi-led coalition contributed to the starvation of Yemeni people? This is the present question which can be answered to a certain extent in this project, but might require narrowing down to a smaller scale, which shall be done by focusing on a single bridge. This question will be the leading thread for the project, but might need some fine-tuning in order to achieve an accurate, concrete, or tangible answer to it. In addition to this question, I do have a sub-research question, and that is, what role can forensic aesthetics of objects and material witnesses play in finding justice for Yemeni people? After all, wouldn't we all actually want to figure out how to find some sort of justice for the people in Yemen? During the Saudi-led coalitional intervention of Yemen, aerial strikes were conducted on various bridges. While the intervention in Yemen has no legal grounds, it continued to bombard Yemeni infrastructure. The bridges targeted by military strikes, often double-tap strikes, were civilian objects which have been disproportionately damaged by these aerial strikes. While the Yemeni archive has pointed out that multiple bridges were struck during the coalitional intervention in Yemen, the bridges which are of interest in this analysis are the Al-Afra Bridge, the Haifa Bridge, the Bab Makhala Bridge, or Bab al-Sheikh Bridge, and the Al-Sayani Bridge. Clustered around the Al-Sayani Bridge are other strikes in the Governorate of Ib. These bridges were struck at different time periods during the Yemen civil war. However, the timing of these strikes is of particular interest in the analysis, as there are correlations between the strikes and the hunger in Yemen. The Al-Sayani Bridge is the initial focal point of the project. The bridges had been of vital importance to transport and distribute food amongst the Yemeni people. The attacks on the bridges themselves can almost certainly be considered to be violations of international humanitarian law, and therefore the attacks can constitute war crimes. The consequences and starvation of Yemenis through the destruction of these bridges can also constitute war crimes or crimes against humanity, and can be prosecuted under universal jurisdiction, for which there are some precedents in international law. The Al-Sayani Bridge is the initial focal point of the project. This bridge was struck at a particular time during the hunger in Yemen and can show that the aerial strikes could be a substantial causal factor for the hunger, as this bridge is seemingly exemplary of the Saudi-led coalition's disregard for the distribution of food. It can also be the bridge which can establish the mens rea, or criminal intent, of possible starvation crimes committed by the Saudi-led coalition. Many attacks, including the Al-Sayani attack, have taken place on the N1 highway, which links the southern port city of Aden to the Houthi-controlled regions in the northern part of Yemen. This is important as it delivers food to the people in Yemen. While the previous map from the Yemeni archive shows the attacks on the N1 highway, this map shows the routes for trade in Yemen. Maps like these shall be used for a comparative analysis in this project. This image shows the starvation that took place in the southern part of Yemen in 2016. The aerial strikes on these bridges have been underreported and could be seen as a significant factor in the starvation of the Yemeni people, and the aerial strikes can be seen as an attempt at starvation of the Yemeni people. This can be seen as a crime in itself and as a violation of international humanitarian law. The following video extracts, which have been borrowed from the Yemeni archive, display the destruction of the Al Sayani Bridge in Yemen. The following images, which have been borrowed from the Yemeni archive, display the destruction of the Al Sayani Bridge in Yemen. As one can see from the videos and images, the bridge has been severely damaged and is likely to have been destroyed beyond any suitable or appropriate proportion permitted in international law or international humanitarian law. The focus for this project at the CRA is to collect data, geolocate the aerial strikes on the bridges, and analyse the impact of these strikes on the bridges, the local Yemeni population, and in particular the role which these strikes have had on the starvation of the Yemeni population. In particular, the mens rea, criminal intent, or actus reus, criminal act of the aerial strikes, needs to be established and whether international humanitarian law has been violated. There is a need for an argument against the current narrow definitions used by the ICRC in determining whether starvation as a crime has taken place, as these definitions of these crimes are quite vague or very narrow and make it easy for perpetrators of such crimes to avoid prosecution. A major issue in establishing the criminal intent of starvation or famine crimes in Yemen is the field causality of the crimes. The causal relation of the starvation and hunger in Yemen is not linear or clear at the present moment. This is due to the fact that the conflict is the most substantial contributor to the hunger and starvation. As the conflict is between multiple parties, it will need to be established which parties contribute substantially to the starvation. However, the focal point for this project will be on the role of the Al Sayani Bridge in the conflict. A remarkable fact, which is not obvious to the war in Yemen, is the correlation between the hunger and relating catastrophes and the rainfall and drought in Yemen during 2015 and 2016. As one can see in this image, the starvation and food-related crisis and catastrophes are situated in the areas of fighting in the more northern part of Yemen, or what would have been called northern Yemen. It is quite clear that in the red areas which correlate with the war and the Saudi-led coalitional strikes that Yemenis are starving. One can see in this image is that the rainfall has been in many of the areas where there is current starvation. One can conclude from seeing both of these images that the war and Saudi strikes have affected an area which in 2015 would have been an ideal area for growing crops and avoiding famine. Yet somehow this has not been avoided, and it seems to me that the Saudi-led coalitional airstrikes could have been a substantial contributor to that. One can see in this image a reinforcement of the idea that actually where there is famine there should actually be some sort of prosperity or food resources. There is a need for doing greater research in the correlation between the rainfall that we see here and the famine that we see in the next image. Another remarkable and seemingly overlooked fact by parties involved in the conflict is that the Lancet produced a paper 3 years prior to the Saudi-led intervention highlighting the fact that Yemen was experiencing a substantial food crisis. Given the fact that this paper was published long before the Saudi-led coalition intervened, it can be established that they could have known that actions conducted by their military could have exacerbated the hunger in Yemen. The method of analysis will consist out of a geolocation of Saudi-led coalitional airstrikes in Yemen, as in its current form it is not easily accessible or convertible, an analysis of famine and or starvation through comparative analysis of maps, an analysis of maps, data, and academic articles, which could be of substantial importance to establishing criminal intent of systematic targeting of infrastructure in Yemen. There will also hopefully be a diagrammatization of famine crimes or starvation crimes for clearer definition and comprehension, as the theory relating to these crimes is not entirely clear or comprehensible for people who might be more visually oriented. A creation of counterforensics of Saudi-led coalitional strikes or strike in the form of an architectural image complex, and a forensic analysis of media relating to the airstrikes and relating to matters connected directly or indirectly to the airstrikes. The theoretical sourcing of this project will primarily consist out of A.L. Weizmann's publication Forensic Architecture, Violence at the Threshold of Detectability, Timotheus Vermeulen's Efflux Journal article of January 2015 titled The New Depthiness, Karen Barad's Getting Real, Technoscientific Practices and the Materialization of Reality from the Differences Journal, the Oxford Journal of International Criminal Justice issue on famine or starvation of September 2019, Deborah Cohen's Deadly Life of Logistics, David Marcus's Famine and Crimes in International Law, and Timothy Morton's Dark Ecology. The main concept for the conceptual framework is agrologistics, which I borrow from Timothy Morton's Dark Ecology. The main practical utilized concepts and framework is the practical framework of forensic architecture and the depthiness notion, which I have utilized from Timotheus Vermeulen. Further frameworks are international humanitarian law, international law, and applicable law to the conflict in Yemen. This all fits within a refined and extending pre-existing personal epistemology which I developed back in the Netherlands. Thank you for listening to this presentation.